Now when I built this harp, I sanded an angle on each side down about a foot and about as wide as the trim piece is here. And this, I did this because I want to have a comfortable harp. When you put this up against your shoulder, a stave back harp is a little more comfortable on your shoulder bone than a square box. And when I nailed the back in place, I stopped the nails up about this high so that I could cut in with my sander quite deeply here and I wouldn't be hitting nails. Well, unfortunately I didn't stop quite soon enough because I have one nail here that does show, and so there's a little boo-boo on this harp. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to do anything about it. There's plenty of wood. It's just a matter of you don't want to have to be sanding through nails and so forth. Now this is the harp that I stained, and I put these rosettes in, and there's some pictures showing how I stained inside the depression there, but left an unstained ridge around the edge, and then I could glue my rosette to that, and that way I didn't have to worry about getting stain on the rosette itself. I could stain the harp first, and with the rosette out of the way I didn't have to worry about goofing on that. So I've installed the rosette now, and now I'm ready to put the top coat on the whole harp here. Now with stain, sometimes it brings out some little sanding errors or some glue spots or fingerprints, that sort of thing, because if there's any glue on the wood, it makes a barrier for the stain, and so then you end up with a light spot. And so I had to sand this area out again, and a little bit over in here and a few other spots. I had to sand down through my stain, get it all off, and go through the whatever barrier was there, whether it was a little bit of glue or some other thing, could have been oil from my fingers, something like that, and then restain that little area. So that's something to consider. Also, when I stained the front, you remember I had masked off the soundboard. Well, the masking worked pretty well, except right up here at the end I got some bleeding right here, and so I'm going to try to oh, and then on this side I see there's a little line of brown that got onto the soundboard. Apparently my masking tape was not up fully tight against the trim. It's not a big deal. I could just go ahead and finish as it is, but I think what I might do is add a little inlay banding on the soundboard before I put my top coat on, because I need to be able to glue the inlay to the soundboard. Before I put my finish coat, I'm going to glue some inlay banding on each side. And there are several different designs that I could choose. I'll show you some pictures here, various inlays and how they look. I'll pick one of these and I'll glue the strips in place right alongside. I'm not going to inlay them. I'm just going to glue them right on the soundboard material up against the sides. or the trim. And it'll look kind of inlaid. It'll have a stepped appearance. So it'll look very nice, but it doesn't require any machining or cutting. Now I've decided to use Inlay D as in dog. You can find it in our catalog and on our website. It comes in strips that are 36 inches long, which is not quite enough to reach the top of the harp, but if you get 3 strips of it, you'll have plenty, and you can splice it together very easily along the pattern using a razor knife. You can also, if you decide, turn the corner and put some along like this, so you're framing the whole front of the harp. And so when you're splicing, you're going to need a block of wood and a razor knife with a nice sharp blade, a fresh blade. And what I do is pick a part of the pattern that I want to splice. In other words, you want to match colors and make it look like the pattern is repeating itself accurately. And so if I want to turn the corner on the light colored part, I would cut right there, and then I would make a similar cut on this, about a 45 or so. It's not going to be exactly that because we're at a slight angle. Okay, so I've got to change my angles here just a little bit to get them to fit, and that's pretty easy to do. I can cut a little bit sharper angle here and try it. And a little bit sharper angle on this one too, until I get the right fit. Well, I've gone a little bit too sharp on this one, so it's a trial and error thing. Change it here. There, that works pretty well. Now, once I get one side fitted, I'm going to use it as a guide for the second side, instead of trying to do all that guesswork again. So I'll put this piece over here, and then I'll cut this one to match that. Not quite perfect. I'm going to do a little more trimming. It would be smart to put a little newspaper down under your work here, because I'm going to spread glue on this inlay strip, and I don't want to get any on the unfinished soundboard. That'll be a problem. I'm also going to take some tape and cut it ahead of time and just have it ready on my workbench. We're going to hold the veneer down with masking tape. Let's start with our first piece. By the way, don't forget to have a damp rag handy. Anytime you're gluing, you want to have a damp rag. I'm just going to start with the little short piece here, just to make sure I've got everything the way I like it. And I'll put a little glue on the underside of the inlay band, just one bead of glue across, and that if it looks like you've got quite a bit, you can wipe some off. You don't want to have a lot of squeeze out when you're doing something like this decorative work, because then it just gives you, it requires more cleanup afterwards. Just put this in place, press it down, and then the masking tape now I'm going to use to try to hold it firmly into the corner, down and in. So I'm pressing it in with my fingernail, and then don't really need to go around the corner, but just get it out of the way there, about like that. Now this next piece is quite a bit longer, so I've got quite a bit of tape ready to go here. Got a little extra glue here at the end. Okay, now when I flip it over, I want to be careful to position it in the right spot right away, because otherwise I'll spread glue or drip glue in the wrong spot. This is looking pretty good. I'll put a little tape up here right away just to make sure it stays put. And then maybe in the middle here. The big challenge here is making sure that you keep the work surface clean, that you do a neat job of it without much glue squeezing out. I've got my mitered corners here that fit. At the other end I should plan where I want to join the splice to the next piece. So I'm going to do it right at one of the lines in the pattern here, and that makes it look less like a splice because there's already a line across there, so it won't be noticeable. Alright, so I'm going to glue these pieces in. I mentioned earlier that woodworking is, in my opinion, it's the skill of learning how to correct your mistakes. And so I'm covering up boo-boos along the stained edge here, and hopefully I won't be adding one mistake to another. So we want to be as cautious as we can here in placing our veneer and, our inlay bands, and not making a mess with the glue. The inlay bands don't need to be full length. In fact, I find it easier to cut it into shorter, more manageable pieces before I glue it down. Because sometimes inlay banding isn't perfectly straight, you know, from humidity changes and stuff. It might take a little curve or a bow or something, and to handle a 36-inch long piece without having it spread glue out onto your soundboard is maybe more than you can expect to handle. So cutting it into 8 or 12-inch lengths is pretty handy, and because you're using a razor knife to trim the ends, you'll hardly ever be able to see the splices. Nobody will notice. Watch for glue squeeze out, and use your damp rag to clean it up right away. scrubbing completely with a clean part of the rag. Don't just spread more glue that you happen to have wiped onto the rag. Use a clean part of the rag and wipe off the glue completely. Now my inlay strips are all glued on, and I've removed most of the tape. Just wanted to point out that if you try to go across the top and the bottom with your inlay banding, you've got some delicate mitering to do up here. Although I suppose you could just run one straight up and the other one against it. But it looks pretty nice when we miter the corners with about a 45-degree angle. But it's not easy. It's going to take some time. Thankfully, there's plenty of inlay banding. If you buy 3 strips, you'll have lots of chances to redo that last piece to get it as well as you can. At this end, I've got these bottom trim pieces hanging over the gap here a little bit. And so I just want to cut them flush with the edge of the notch. And so I'll just use a chisel here. I suppose there's several things I could use, maybe a side cutter for wire, or my razor knife. But I don't want to lift at all, and so I don't want to be using a saw blade that pushes down and lifts up. So I'm just going to tap it with this chisel. That seems to work very well. There. Now remember, I've not yet finished the soundboard. And although I did sand it with 180 grit sandpaper, now I'm going to sand the inlay banding slightly. And that's a little tricky because I don't want to sand any of my stained wood. I just want to sand this to smooth it out, just the inlay banding. So I'm making myself another little sanding block. This time it has to be small. In fact, it has to be small enough to be able to fit up into this section up in here. Now I've made myself a little sanding block out of a scrap of 1/4-inch plywood and just glued some 150 or 180 grit sandpaper to it. And that's how I'm going to sand this area here to smooth out the rosette or the inlay banding. A couple of tricks I want to show you. It's pretty hard to trim the sandpaper exactly flush, and if it sticks out at all and I'm running it along here like this, I may sand into my stained wood a little bit. So I'm going to take my other bigger block and actually sand the sandpaper at a slight bevel, just so that I know there's a completely smooth edge here. I'm going to do that all the way around, just to make sure there's no sandpaper extending beyond the wood here. In fact, I'd like to hold the sandpaper back just a little bit from the edge of the wood. You can kind of feel how smooth it is with your hands. I'm going to knock off the burr on the top too. Okay, now I have smooth edges all the way around, no sandpaper extending beyond the the wood. And then I want to be careful that I don't sand the soundboard either. So I want to lift my sanding block off the soundboard a little bit. And what better way than to use a scrap of the same thickness inlay strip on the other edge, and I can just tape that in place along one side, and then I'll sand with this side. So I'm going to run this along like that. And that way I'm sanding only the inlay banding, not the soundboard, not the sides. I'll have to move my strip when I want to sand the very top here a little bit. But meanwhile I'm going to sand the rest of the harp this way. Now I've got my inlay sanded smooth, and get out my top coat finish here. And I'm going to finish all the plain parts of the wood of the harp before I do any of the stained areas, because the varnish itself will pick up a little bit of the brown color from the stained wood, and so I don't want to do that until after I've put varnish on the white areas here. So I just use my clean cotton rag and wipe a thin coat of finish over the whole soundboard here. After I do the white parts, the plain birch soundboard, I'll go back and I'll do the inlay banding, and then I'll do the rosette on the side, and then I'll put a coat of varnish on all the stained areas. That way my rag, once it starts to get a little light brown in color, won't transfer that color to any of the white parts. Now on this blonde harp, where I didn't put any color, I decided to put a decal on the soundboard. And it's a very simple process. It's a water transfer decal. We can print it on a laser printer or an inkjet printer, and then cut out the pattern carefully from our 8.5 by 11 sheet, and then soak that part in some warm water for a minute or so, and then we can slide the decal off of the backing right onto the wood and kind of dab it, make sure to get any wrinkles or bubbles out of it, and dab it with a paper towel. Now I've let it dry thoroughly. By the way, I put one coat of top coat on the wood first, because you want a very nice smooth surface. I put my first varnish layer on, and then I sanded it with my 600 grit paper, so it's baby smooth. And then I put my decal on and let it dry thoroughly. And now I'm going to varnish right over the decal. I use just a scrap of clean cotton t-shirt material, wrap it around my finger, and dip it in this gel top coat, and then I will varnish right over the decal. And while I'm at it, I'll put a second coat of varnish on the whole harp. But the idea is that we are sealing this decal in place. These are pretty neat decals. They don't have any noticeable thickness, so it looks very much like the pattern is painted right on the wood.